Did not have a folder, red folder? Did not get a red folder? All right, grab a red folder. I'm assuming they're not going to have a book. So what we're doing with the books is we're trying to do one book per family for now. You can share that book with your significant other. Oh, you know what? I didn't get my book. Now I got to go through the classroom to get it off the desk. No, I have mine. I need. Forgot something. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Can we help you? Okay.
All right, so the book that we're using is the book I told you before that I used when I was in college, the NIV Harmony of the Gospels. It's been a very helpful book to me. Every time I study the Gospels, I go back to this, and it helps me put things in proper order and proper perspective. So you'll need at least one of these per family, and then the folders, you can each have your own so you can answer the questions if that's what you like to do. Some people don't like to share. They want their own stuff. If we have extra books as we continue on, then we can divvy them out to you if you want 2 books in your family instead of just one. But now we're just going to go with 1 per family. Before we get started, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. God, we love you so very much. We thank you that your timing is always perfect. We thank you that you love us and you take care of us. Help us to be patient. Help us to know that your outcomes are always better than what we would prefer and what we would like. We love you so much. We thank you for the great accounts we have of the life of your Son while he lived on this earth. Help us this quarter as we study these accounts that we'll learn a lot about Jesus and how Jesus lived his life and what he did and how his life impacted so many people on so many different levels. Help us to put ourselves in their perspective and learn the stories that you would have us to learn. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so there's a couple things we want to keep in mind as we study this together. One is we're not going to stop at any particular section and dissect it. What does this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? Because we have 1 quarter to get through the life of Christ. So if we stop and say, hey, let's talk 30 minutes on this particular passage, we're never going to get through it. If you don't know what something means and would like to know what that means, just write me a note, bring it to my attention, and I can maybe discuss that with you offline or do some research and get back to you. But we just can't stop all the time, because one of the things that we want to do in this course is we want you to maybe for the first time, instead of seeing the life of Christ segmented and not in chronological order, just think about how confusing it would be if you were studying history, but you were just jumping around all the time. And you are missing some very important parts. So what we want to do is present the life of Jesus in a story format. So we know what he did now, and then what he did next, and what he did next, and what he did next, instead of what he did here, and then what he did here, and then what he did over here, and then what he did over here. We want you to see the narrative as it goes, and we also want you to understand a very, very important point. The people that we are reading about, these are real people who made decisions in real time. And they were digesting Jesus and all the information that he was presenting to them, all the things he was doing. They were having to digest that 1 miracle at a time and 1 sermon at a time. It wasn't, they couldn't go pick up a book and read about his entire life in a few hours and know everything that goes on. So this was challenging for some of them as far as taking in everything that Jesus was doing in it. Man, that was just blowing their mind, and all the understanding they have of Scripture. So I think that's an important aspect of what we want to do in this particular course. Chronological order, as a story, and then what we can learn from these. So the questions that we are asking this quarter, the same questions every week, and there's a lot of reasons I do that. I like to do that. One is, if you know ahead of time the stories that are coming for next week, and you know the questions ahead of time, because they're the same questions every week, when you're in the car, you can start thinking about the answers to those questions. When you're exercising, when you're walking, whatever the case, but you don't have to have the sheet of paper in front of you, nor the text, because you know the story of the woman at the well. You know that story. You know what's coming. So what are we going to be talking about regarding the woman at the well? We're going to be looking at what I can learn from that, what lessons that we can gather from that. The other thing that I want to make sure that we understand, this isn't the first class, but this is my first class teaching. So I want to really encourage you, please read the sections ahead of time. The book lays it out in a easy way to do it because it gives you all the accounts of the same story together. So you can read all the accounts together and piece it together in a great format. It's like if your kids do something and you're trying to get to the bottom, who broke the vase or whatever the case may be, and it can't be you don't know who it is. So you might ask all the kids, tell me what happened. And so all the kids are telling you what happened, and then you're able to piece all that together and know what the truth is. So all these gospel writers are telling us a different version, all truth, but it's coming together in a way that is very, very important. And the other thing, before we get into our study this morning, I want you to understand is one of the things that John is doing here at the beginning. You notice most of our readings right now coming out of the book of John. I picture it this way, or I think about it this way. He's the last gospel to be written, and he's almost like, all right, these gospel accounts have been brought forward. One eyewitness, a couple who received these stories from others. Maybe Mark maybe received his from Peter. Luke, we know what he did. He just sat down to interview a bunch of people to find out what the story was so he would make sure it was accurate. John is going back and saying, all right, I'm going to do the prequel almost. I'm going to give you a lot of information that some information the other guys didn't give you to sort of give you a behind-the-scenes look at what was taking place at the beginning. When it was just a few of us. And when people were first starting to realize who Jesus was and what Jesus was doing. So I think that's interesting as it comes to John. So far, where we have been in our story, this is the sermon. This is the sermon. I need the class presentation, please. So what we've covered so far, Jesus, his parents started out at Nazareth, and then they go down to Bethlehem where Jesus is born. They go to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem, they go down to Egypt. Spends a couple years in Egypt. After Egypt, he comes back up to Nazareth. He's going to spend most of his early childhood up in Nazareth, and then while he's living up there, every year, he comes down to Jerusalem a couple times, right? Because that's the feast. So he's constantly coming down to Jerusalem. We know he was there at the age of 12. We have no reason to believe he wasn't there whenever the law required him to be there. And so he's coming down to Jerusalem a lot. And so what he has seen over and over and over and over again, and we talked about this at one of the Lord's Supper talks we did not too long ago, so here we go here. So he went to Nazareth, and then he went to the desert to be tempted. Then he went to Bethany. We had the wedding feast. And then he goes to Jerusalem, and that's where we are right now. So he came to Jerusalem. It's the hub, and this is where things are starting to get interesting. This is the beginning of his ministry. This is going to be the first Passover that he is there. And we talked about him cleansing the temple. We see that Nazareth is way up here. Or Capernaum is way up here, is where he is, and then he's going to go down to Jerusalem. So let's go ahead and look at the story that's recorded for us in John chapter 2. So verse 12, John chapter 2 and verse 12, it says, after he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. So that's just one verse, but I do want to talk about this one verse briefly. Because one of the things that will help us understand the context of the entire Bible are the linking verses. These are the verses that link the stories together, and historically, we don't talk about those very much. We talk about this story and this story, but sometimes we forget these verses. So when you think about this, it brings a lot to my mind, just the beginning. Jesus and his disciples, only a few at this point, and his brothers and his mother are all going to Capernaum together. Any significance in there? Anything that when you're reading this, saying, hey, that's sort of odd. That's sort of interesting. What can I learn from this one verse? What just strikes me as being maybe out of place or something should be here? Someone should be here. Someone's missing. Where's Joseph? Right? Joseph was mentioned profusely in the birth of Jesus. He was involved in all of that. He was the one that was told to go to Jerusalem or Egypt. He was the one that was told to bring him back to basically back to Bethlehem, but then back over to Nazareth because of Herod's son was over in place. But now he's not here. So I think that this starts this process of helping us put this in some kind of a story format. Because what's Jesus' position in the family? He's basically the leader of the family. He's the oldest son. And so the brothers, as they're mentioned here, in this particular occasion, they're moving together. They're going together because that's what families did. Just like when they went to Jerusalem together for the feast, the whole family went together. So now Jesus is sort of, he's dictating where the family goes. Now, what makes that interesting is in the sermon, we'll hit chapter 7 a little bit, but what makes that so interesting is in chapter 7, when chapter 7 starts, it specifically says his brothers didn't believe in him. So in just 18 months or so, they go from his brothers basically going wherever he goes because he's sort of in charge of the family now, to I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe that he is who he says he is. Or I don't believe this is the mission that God has called you for. And he sort of, they provoke him to go make yourself known publicly at the feast. Enough of this secret type stuff. So then we have the story that starts in verse 13. I did do a Lord's Supper talk on this not too long ago, so we won't read this entire thing. But what this right here just sort of shows that this is the temple area and the court of the Gentiles, the very outside. They had marketplaces that could have been in several different places in town where this kind of stuff should be happening. So let's go and just talk about each Jew was required to pay a temple tax. All right? And that is based on the law. And that temple tax had to be paid with Jewish money. But what was the problem with Jewish money at this particular point? It's the Jews aren't in charge, right? The Jews aren't in charge. So the Jews came up with a system. They started minting a special coin that had been minted entire for years. And it was the most pure coin on earth at that particular time. You know, we have different grades of silver, right? And sometimes you see those, some of you may buy a lot of silver or gold, I don't know, but you'll see the ads that say 99.999% pure silver. And back in those days, the coins varied a lot. So if a silver coin from one part of the world was not as valuable as a silver coin from another part of the world. And I noted in that Lord's Supper talk that this coin that they used in order to buy and sell things at the temple had an idol on it. So the inscription was an idol. But it was the only coin they could use to buy the sacrifices in order to offer them to God. And I tried to bring our mind to this, just viewing of this. Jesus saw this every single year. He saw when he was 12, when he had understanding, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the way up to now at the age of 30, but he was unable to do anything about it. And I say unable because usually a rabbi wasn't considered to be someone that you would listen to until he turned 30, until he got his credentials, if you will. He's lived long enough that he now might have something worth saying. I remember one of our professors, the professor that taught this class, said to all of us young guys, never write anything till you're at least 35. Because before you're 35, one, you may not be smart enough to write anything, but two, you're going to change your mind so many times. You're going to look back at that stuff. Just give yourself some time. Jesus had the credentials now. So as Jesus comes into town, he knows what to expect. He knows what he's going to see when he gets in that temple. And when he gets in that temple, he sees it, and then he decides to cleanse the temple of all the things that are going wrong there. But I do think it's important for us to note, in Deuteronomy chapter 14, this idea, this concept of having an opportunity to go and buy the animals, that was God ordained. So why did God allow that? Why did God say, it's okay to come to Jerusalem and purchase the animals that you're going to sacrifice? Emery?
They had to travel.
Yeah. It was what was God's intent? What can we just from that one thing? We'll talk about this for a second, but from that one thing, what do we find out about God? What can you know about God from that one idea? Is God always trying to make things difficult on us? Aren't God's laws and instructions good for us? And isn't it a do we know what's wrong with this? All right, I'm going to just talk loud. I mean, they're not. All right, guys, I'm sorry. Remember when we studied the class on grace? We challenged us to put on different lenses when we look at some of these stories. So look at this. So when God is giving everyone a chance, when you come to Jerusalem to keep the feasts, I'm going to allow you to sell your animals before you come, and then come to Jerusalem and buy the animals instead of having to take the animals with you. That is a moment of grace. That's a moment of grace. So what do people do a lot of times with God's grace? As far as this story goes especially. What happens, somebody tells us what happens in this story. Raise your hand, you want to just give us a brief summary. Joy's going to tell us. Joy's always good at summarizing the stories. Hold on, Brock's bringing you a mic.
It shows that even though God in his grace and mercy made provisions for them that would not be too difficult for them, they corrupted it.
Yes. So here's this thing God gave as a gift, right? He's giving you a gift. And what does man do with God's gift? They put extra stuff on it and make it more difficult or corrupt it. What did they do with the Sabbath day? Was the Sabbath day a gift that God gave the people? Absolutely. But what did the Pharisees do with the Sabbath day? They made it an incredible burden that God never intended for it to be. And so early on in this story, we're seeing that Jesus is coming into a world that has been corrupted by man's way of thinking. And they've taken things that God meant to be favorable for people and made them into corrupt ideas here. So tell me, what do you think about Jesus as he first enters this time and he sees what's going on? Given what I said about just waiting all these years, think he's sort of anxious? You think he knows what he's doing before he gets there? This isn't a surprise when he gets there. He's been there before. He knows what this is, and he knows my ministry has started. When I get there, I'm going to make some kind of a statement about what is going on. So let's just go ahead and go to this. Every week, these are the questions. So in this section of cleansing the temple, what do these stories teach us about God, about Christ, and about ourselves? What do these stories teach us about God, Christ, and ourselves? Anything? We've sort of touched on a couple of them. It's going to be a lot more interesting if you guys participate in this. We learn nothing about God or Jesus from this story. Wow. That's amazing. All right. Gary has something. I'll wait you out. Who has it? All right, you got two in that aisle.
Well, one thing I see is that God is a pure God, and he's teaching us to be pure, and sometimes he has to demonstrate that to us when we're off the path he's set before us. And he makes it easy, like we've said, and we corrupt it or make it torturous, but he loves us so much, and he He's got a plan from the beginning, and he just wants us to follow that plan.
Okay? So he's patient with us. He wants us to follow the plan. Right behind you. Go, Carrie. Go ahead. Brock. Right there. Thanks, buddy.
I think just echoing kind of what we were saying earlier, I feel like it's kind of a parallel to sort of the Bible as a whole, of like God has given us these things. He's given us this grace. We have gone in. Mankind has gone in and corrupted it, taken advantage of it, turned it into something else, and then here we have Jesus coming in and kind of turning it around, trying to restore.
Yeah. And this is almost, I wouldn't say human nature, but don't people do this all the time? When they were going to the promised land, what did God say about the laws he was giving them? These are for your good. Not only are these for your good, if you follow my laws, everybody will see how amazing my laws are, and you'll look smart. You'll just look like your life will be peaceful. You have all these good things, and you'll look smart, even though you're not really the smart one. You're just smart enough to follow what I tell you to do. And isn't that true in life today? Look at families. Families that live according to God's plan, and people look at the stability that the kids are living in, the relationship between the husband and wife of love and joy and kindness, and how they work together for common goods, and they're not selfish. And they look at that and sometimes be like, wow, that Emery has it all figured out. Emery and Angie have it all figured out. And I'm sure Emery and Angie have a lot figured out, but what do they have figured out the most? Do it God's way, right? And so doing it God's way is what brings it there. But what do men do? They corrupt that and they destroy it. So what we can learn about ourselves sometimes is, are there things in God's law, God's book, instructions, that I'm not living correctly, I'm corrupting, and changes that I need to make? All right, Jason?
I'm sure you're all familiar with Malachi, and what Malachi taught over and over to the nation of Israel was that the reason you do something matters. The reason you're doing something matters. These people were not, yes, God said it was okay to buy the animals, but that was as a convenience, as a service, to help them to worship him truly. And that is not what these people were doing. That was not their motive for supplying it. They were ripping people off, and they were trying to make a profit. If we seek to profit off of our God, it is not going to end well for us. And I think that's part of the lesson here is, you can do these things. You can help change the money so that people have the right coin so they can pay the temple tax. You can sell these animals so that people have animals to sacrifice when they come and journey here to the temple. But the reason you're doing that is to glorify God, not to make a buck.
And to help his people.
Right.
I'm taking something that should be convenient for the people, I'm turning into something that they hate, they dread. They dread coming in here and dealing with this system that we've created. They know they're going to get taken advantage of. If you know you're going to get taken advantage of, don't you hate that? I mean, you hate the whole concept of this. And that's what they were feeling every time they go to Jerusalem to make this. I know I'm going to take advantage of. I sold my animal up there to bring the money down. It's not going to give me anything compared to what I got up there. I'm going to have to pay double, whatever the case may be. They're going to rip me off. And that's a hard choice. So if you were eyewitness to this story of Jesus cleansing the temple, what do you think you would have been thinking?
I was thinking about this in point number one, that the people in the temple had been living a life of impassiveness. They were just sitting there watching it and saying, well, I really don't like that. Okay. And, they're just kind of mumbling in the background. Jesus comes in and says, this is not right. This has got to change now. This is not right to my God. It's kind of like David's response to Goliath. Mm-hmm. How can you do this? How can you stand by and do this? I don't care about my own safety. And Jesus was at a point in his life, as you kind of said before, if he had done this when he was 18 years old, 13 years old, he had no respect. He would have been just a hot-headed kid. Now, not. He has respect. And it's like, oh, we should have done that before.
Yeah. And so what are you thinking when somebody comes and does what you know you should have been doing all along? They show the courage to do what you should have done all along. What is sort of your feeling towards that particular person? If you're an honest, sincere seeker, it's almost like, wow, you're drawn to that person, aren't you? You're drawn to the person that does the right thing, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous, and you have a huge amount of respect for that person. And I think that would be a feeling. Part of it might be, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I have the courage to do that? Some people might be feeling, how dare he? That's what the religious leaders were feeling, right? And to be honest with you, sometimes we like to put ourselves in the story as always the good guy, right? And we always think, I would have been the one to do this. And I've been vulnerable to you guys on multiple occasions, telling you I probably would not have been one of the first followers. My personality, we're ingrained that this is the right way to do stuff, right? And then when somebody comes along and says, no, man, that may not be the right way to do it, we're very slow to maneuver over to a new way of thinking, or even to consider sometimes new ways of thinking. So I probably would not have been one of the first followers. I would have been watching at a distance for a while. I'm being honest with you. I just would have, well, what's gonna happen to those guys, you know? I sort of want to make sure it's safe before I'm gonna take my step out there. You guys might have been different, but that's probably how I would have reacted.
I was just going to say, I think I'm probably with you on that. Like, I think I generally, as a person, am more, like, skeptical, more,
Yes.
Whatever. But seeing this, I mean, because the Jews asked him, they're like, why are you doing this? Like, I feel like, just knowing myself with how I view things, would be like, whoa, this is an outburst of emotion. Like, why are we coming? Like, even though, like, the wrong thing was happening, to come in and, like, turn everything up, like making a scene.
Our eyes would have gotten this big, right?
Yeah.
As we were watching this?
Yeah, and being so honest, I potentially would have also been one of the people to be like, whoa, why, like, why this outburst of,
Is this
kind of like,
necessary?
oh, look at this emotion, like this big, like, yeah, I feel like that could have been a shock and kind of a hard thing, because they ask him, like, when he says, like, well, I'm going to rebuild the temple in 3 days, and like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It took 46 years, whatever years to do this. Anyway, so I feel like I probably would have been in the same camp as you.
Yeah. So just what's going on here? Why couldn't he think of another way to do this? I mean, this is pretty in your face to the Jewish leaders. Now, the Jewish leaders, it all depends on your heart going into this, right? The Jewish leaders are set in their ways. They're in charge. They're the ones that know everything. And this guy, who does he think he is? And so they ask him for a sign. Give us proof that you can do this. And Jesus doesn't play their game, really. He just tells them, I'm going to give you a sign, all right. And he alludes to, we have one up here, Brock. He alludes to the ultimate sign from the very beginning. The ultimate sign is, destroy the temple, in 3 days I will build it up. Now, he wasn't talking about the temple. He was talking about the temple of his body. That was going to be the ultimate sign. Wouldn't he?
Well, I do think that you're looking at the people who are making their livelihood. So they're going to be really upset. What you're telling me, I can't make this much money anymore. Secondly, they were in the temple doing business. That is not where you do business. You do it outside of the temple.
Yep.
So any person who is kind of worth their salt as a Jew should know that. So everyone's really uncomfortable. At first you're calling me out because I'm doing
Yes.
something I shouldn't be in the temple, and I'm not calling it out, or even if you're not participating. Secondly, these people who are making money are pretty upset because you just took away their livelihood.
Yeah.
And then you're embarrassing them, and you're telling them you're dead wrong. Nobody likes to be told they're dead wrong on things, even when it's very obvious they were. So the people are going to be really upset.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's three things there. One is nobody likes to be told they're wrong. The other thing is nobody likes their power to be taken away from them. This guy's challenging my power, my influence. Nobody likes somebody else to come take their influence away or their power away. And no one likes people to take their money away from them. Especially if it's been a pretty sweet gig so far, right? I just come here and Emery brings me a coin. I can say, I think that's only 73% silver. You're going to have to give me more money than this. And so that's what they were doing. And so nobody likes to be told they're wrong. Nobody likes their power to be taken away from them. Nobody likes their influence to be taken away from them. And nobody likes their money to be taken from them. So Jesus, is he ruffling feathers here? Now, what we'll talk about in the Nicodemus story, we're going to skip the Nicodemus story for our class because that's the sermon. Nicodemus is one of them. All right, he's one of them. And so how this thing unfolds, these are his buddies, these are his comrades, these are the people that he's been associated with all this time. They were thinking sort of the way he did, and so it becomes even more challenging. So anything else on the third or fourth? I'll let you, anything this story taught you this time that maybe you didn't know before? I was impressed when I did the Lord's Supper talk about the coin having an idol on it and the Jewish leaders being fine with that. I mean, okay, you can buy that with this, but you're going to have to hold this idol in your hand to exchange the money. That was interesting to me. And then number 4, I think maybe Joy talked about this, or no, I think Jason talked about this. Guard against commercializing or trying to prosper from God in a financial way. I mean, even preachers are warned against that specifically, right? You don't peddle the gospel. So this is, it's not something, this isn't for us. Our treasures are laid up somewhere else for all of us. And so it's not, and be careful that we don't take something that God intended to be good and turn it into something difficult. And sometimes we have a tendency of doing that, I think, because we're so careful we don't want to make God mad that we don't even do what God wants sometimes because we're afraid of making him mad. And so we got to be careful about that. All right, let's skip. We'll just see if I can get the questions there in this next section. We'll skip everything else. All right, so in the Nicodemus story, as you were thinking about the story of Nicodemus, and you've read that this week, what did the story of Nicodemus teach you about God, Christ, or yourself? One of the other things to consider, as you guys think about this, one of the other things to consider, Harvard graduates, think about Harvard graduates for a second. Do they like to be told and one-upped by somebody who went to state school? Junior college and then the state school? And that's sort of what you're having with Jesus and the Pharisees, right? They had the elite education, and here this guy, not only is he trying to tell us we're wrong, and we don't have this figured out, but they have to wrestle with this. What he says makes a lot of sense, right? And that's even more difficult. Joy?
Well, I think the fact Nicodemus was acknowledging that Jesus had to be from God or he could not do all these things. But he's troubled by it because Jesus is upsetting the status quo.
Yeah.
So he's questioning.
Yeah, for sure. He's questioning here. And there's a saying in our declaration. It talks about how men are prone to accept evil as long as the evil can be tolerated. How many? Isn't it easy to stay at a bad job just because even if you have a bad boss, because this is what I know, and it almost has to get really, 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 really bad, and your life has to be so miserable before you'll make any kind of a change here. And so we have to consider those thoughts as well in this, and what Nicodemus is figuring. I don't like the status quo being upended. I'm part of it, right? I'm part of it, and I benefit from it. So, but Jesus is doing enough that makes sense to him that he wants to follow along. Anything else? If you were Nicodemus, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, and you heard Jesus tell you all. I mean, one of the fascinating things about this passage is we don't know who heard the most famous verse in the Bible. John 3:16, right? It could have been a lot of people, but probably not. It's probably just Nicodemus and a few disciples that heard Jesus say, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." And sometimes I think that I'm sure Jesus said it multiple times in different ways, but on this particular occasion, it wasn't that way. So if I'm Nicodemus, and I leave this encounter with Jesus, I mean, what are you thinking? You've had this encounter with Jesus. Everything that you've thought your entire life is being turned upside down in real time. Remember, these are real people making real decisions in real time. As you're walking back home, what are you thinking? Part of me's thinking, this is going to change everything. I mean, I don't, my life's never going to be the same. I think he's already getting in that aspect of it right now. Randy has something up here. You especially, I mean, Nicodemus should have known all this stuff. Jesus questions him. You should recognize when God's fulfilling his major promise from the Old Testament. You should know the passage in Ezekiel, the passage in Isaiah, the passage in Jeremiah that talks about what this is going to look like, and yet you're so blind, you're not seeing what's right here before your eyes. Randy?
Yeah, I think one thing is if they accept this, then and they follow Christ, they get thrown out of the temple. You know, that changes their whole life, maybe even their ability to work.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is this going to do to my life? How can I deal with that change? And what am I going to do? In one of the parables, he said, I can't dig and I can't beg, kind of thing. What am I going to do? How's this going to change my life? How am I going to deal with that change? And there's a lot of fear involved with that, because you're looking at something that's like the antithesis of what you've always known and what you've always done.
And I think you do start counting the cost. What's this going to cost me? If I go along with this, I'm starting to see his points, right? If I go along with this, what is this going to mean to me in my long term? And people don't like to get their money taken away from him. What's going to happen if he goes through with this and actually becomes a disciple of Jesus? Why were there so many people afraid to do that? Because they were scared of the Jews. As a matter of fact, we'll see in our lesson this morning with Joseph of Arimathea, who gives Jesus' tomb. It says he was a disciple, but secretly for fear of the Jews. All right, so he was on the. So I think there's that. And is that a reasonable thing to consider? Is the cost a reasonable thing to spend some time considering? I think it is. Is God patient as we consider the cost? I think he is. This is the grace we're talking about again, right? Does God, when I'm struggling with something, does this really mean what I've thought it meant my whole life, or does it possibly mean something else? Does he want me to have the courage to really examine it faithfully? And is it okay if he's saying, you know what, Dwayne, if you believe that, Randy may never talk to you again. If they just might run you out of here on the rails. Is that something worth considering? Yes. And I think Nicodemus this is a real man making this decision in real time. Now Jesus is going to give him several years to make this decision, and he's patient with him this entire time. So let's go ahead and go to the last story, which is the woman at the well. So we're just going to go straight to the questions again. All right, so most of you have studied the woman in the well multiple times in your life. What do these stories teach you about God, Christ, and yourself? Anything? When you read this story, what do you think? Where do you put your place in the story? What lesson can you learn from this? Or what does it learn? What do you know about Jesus from this? I need a stool, I think. All right, Emery's going to bail me out here. Brock, Emery has his hand up. Unfortunately, we only have one microphone now, so we can't be taking turns. But if you have something, raise your hand so Brock knows where to go next.
So it points to God is so wonderful and mighty that he'll even come to me. It doesn't matter my condition, my status, or anything. He'll come to me and ask me, do you want to follow me?
Yeah. So what do you think this woman felt after a week after Jesus left or a month after Jesus left? I think she's feeling some of that, right? I cannot believe that man stopped at this well that I come to every day and took the time to talk to me, and it totally changed our entire city. And I think that's a good point for us to consider. God loves all of us, and he doesn't pick the Pharisees. And that's the whole message of the gospel, at least part of the message of the gospel, is he doesn't take the most intelligent and the wealthiest and all of this. He wants the message to go to everybody. So he picks people who are receptive of it. Anything else? I think it shows, bring it up here to her, I'll make one point. I think it shows that there is a constant thirst in people for the truth and for God. This lady might not have known it at that particular moment, but when she saw it, she goes, I want that water. That's way better. And so when we lay out the options, do you want the physical water or the spiritual water? And the benefits of both, we talk about people don't like to take your money away from you, but when you take that and put it out in an honest evaluation, what will most people choose if they have a chance to think about it for a while? It may not be today, but eventually, Jesus words it where, what will a man give in exchange for a soul? When you boil it down to that easy of a comment, it's sort of easy to put things in perspective.
In your comment, it said you said that the city was changed. She couldn't stop telling people about this man. She just had to tell everybody, come see him.
Yeah, for
Let me
sure.
tell you about this guy.
Yeah. And I love her. There's an evangelistic type lesson here because her evangelism was really interesting. And, I see these are real people making real decisions in real time. She made a lot of them really fast because she goes, why will you be talking to me? And she goes, sir. She calls him sir twice, I think. Sir. And then what did she say? I think you might be a prophet. So that's a progression that she had to make in real time. I see something different about you. You've told me everything that I've had. And then she starts asking him spiritual questions, and he's talking about the time's going to come when Jerusalem or Samaria, it doesn't matter, but God is seeking those who are going to worship him in spirit and in truth, the mountain, the places that matter. And then she takes the next step, and the next step is, I think this guy might be the Messiah. So you take what Nicodemus, it's going to take Nicodemus almost 3 years to figure this thing out. From step one, introduction to Jesus, to I'm at least willing to do this for Jesus. It takes this lady a conversation. And one of the reasons for this is, who had the most to lose? Nicodemus by far. Who had the most to gain? This woman. Do you think God's patient with both? I think he is. He knows that. Jesus knows that. As a matter of fact, this whole section started that Jesus didn't need anybody to testify about what was in man because he knew man. Jesus had been around for thousands of years up to this point, right? Not on earth, but Jesus knew man. He knew Adam and Eve's sin. He knew the flood. He knew what was in man's hearts. And he also knew the struggling people and what was in their heart. And so he was coming to talk to them. All right. What about eyewitness? Let's answer. We have 2 minutes. Anybody want to, if you were an eyewitness to this, a fly on the wall, or maybe you heard this, or, I know that the people that came and heard, we believe now not because of what you told us, but what we've heard him teach over the last several days. Anything about how you would have felt? Thought? Okay, this is what the word amazed happens all the time in the Bible about Jesus. The people were amazed beyond measure and marveled. I love that phrase. I think I would have been amazed if I were one of the people in this Samaritan town. Joy?
I guess it's not exactly an answer to that question, but I think this shows how powerful a receptive heart can be.
Absolutely.
These people were receptive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, good point. And so Jesus, one of the things that you learned, maybe that you didn't pick up another time, let me just go to that real quickly. You can ring the bell whenever you have to. But it said Jesus had to go to Samaria. Did Jesus have to go to Samaria from a human standpoint? Were there a lot of times people had to go from Judea to Galilee and they did not go through Samaria? Yeah, that was the normal route, right? Around Samaria. But why did Jesus have to go to Samaria? Is it because he had no other way? No, it was a lot deeper meaning than that. He had to go to Samaria because he had a mission in Samaria. He had to take the message to Samaria, and I think that's important. Randy, and we'll be done.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing considering her social standing and all, that these people listened to her and came out there. But like Joey was saying, they were so looking for and receptive to the Messiah, you might say, that they were still willing to go.
Hey, do you think, just to leave you with this, do you think her eagerness and her excitement about what she just encountered herself persuaded some of them to at least go out? Do you think she went back to town and said, you know what, there's a guy out there and he's all right. He said some good things and blah, blah. I mean, she was excited about it. Do you think our excitement level about being a Christian and whether they even come? I mean, if your attitude about, we got to go to church, right? Or it's, hey, we get to go, we talk that with our kids, right? It makes a big difference. And so I encourage all of us to make sure our attitudes are correct. Thank you, everybody.